This episode is brought to you by DistroKid. DistroKid is the easiest way for musicians to get their music into all the platforms: Amazon, Apple, Tidal, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and more. Plus, you've got unlimited uploads, and the artist keeps 100% of what they make. But what I love most about DistroKid is their app. The design of it just makes the whole process so easy. Now you can be sure that you're doing everything you need to do to get your music out there. Go to distrokid.com to check it out or download the app now.
Allow me to live and breathe like a man.
You've heard his words on classic albums like Pacific Ocean Blue and Friends. His 1969 collaboration with Brian Wilson, A World of Peace Must Come, gained almost legendary status as one of pop's most storied lost albums, before being resurrected to great acclaim by Light in the Attic in 2008. Now you're cordially invited to take a trip into the mind of poet and songwriter Stephen J. Kalinich. Heyday Again Records presents I Love My Life, a postcard from one of the last standing poets of peace and excitation. Order your copy today. I Love My Life by Stephen J. Kalinich and Friends. You'll see why heavy hitters like Brian Wilson, Dennis Wilson, Paul McCartney, Steve Cropper, P.F. Sloan, and Diana Ross have all worked with him. I Love My Life by Stephen J. Kalinich. Order today at realgonemusic.com. Again, that's realgonemusic.com. Future Prophet Records presents Gargoyle's new single, Alligator Head. This and other essential singles from the New York Underground, all designed to catapult today's great bands into tomorrow, and all available at futureprophetrecords.com. That's Prophet, futureprophetrecords.com. So back to If I Could Only Remember My Name, the one review that it really is kind of crazy to think of is in 2010, the record was listed second behind the Beatles' Revolver on the top 10 pop albums of all time, published in the Vatican City newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano. Did you know that?
I did indeed, and I thought that was an incredible statement. I mean, who knew that people in the Vatican were listening to If I Could Only Remember My Name? That's insane.
It is insane because it's so obviously, and I say this with great love, it is head music of the top order. The fact that they're connecting with it on a cosmic level away from that, it speaks really to the album's eternal strengths. Welcome to Discograffiti, the Music Obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebro, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on David Crosby's classic solo debut, If I Could Only Remember My Name, Psst, along with our special guest, Graham Nash. This episode is part of a series called Wild Tales, the Graham Nash Interview Series, in which we discuss every last release the great Graham Nash ever had a hand in creating, including CSN, CSNY, CNN, and his solo career, and it details a history almost too crazy to be believed. Here are just a few of the many things that Graham discusses with Discograffiti in this podcast. An overview of the initial spate of CSNY solo projects and how they all performed relative to one another. The origin story of the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra and the albums on which this massive aggregate of legendary musicians have appeared. The only track on which Neil Young and Jerry Garcia are both playing guitar. how Jerry Garcia wound up being the hero of Remember My Name, and what exactly David and the Dorks was, the massive boatload of Crosby's session outtakes, all of which is top-notch quality, the outstanding financial debt for which Cros is still on the hook to Graham, Jerry Garcia's favorite of his own pedal steel guitar performances, and an in-depth deep dive on every song that comprises David Crosby's If I Could Only Remember My Name, including David's own lyrical analyses. If you're a Graham Nash and CSNY superfan like me, you'll want to turn this free version off right now and opt for the director's cut of this episode on our Patreon page, which is ad-free and features 14 additional minutes of essential material. And you can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Here's what you're missing this week if you're not a Patreon member. If you're a member at the private tier, you're missing out on the director's cut of part 1 of our incredible upcoming Billy Joel series featuring Unrest's Mark Robinson, plus an exclusive interview with Larry Levine, Brian Wilson, and Phil Spector's engineer. If you're a member at the lieutenant tier, you're missing out on our Larry Levine interview. And if you're a member at the major tier, well, you're not missing a single thing, because the major tier gives you access to everything that Discograffiti releases. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! So between September 1970 and May 1971, each of you released really high-profile solo records, really, really good material. First, it was Neil's After the Gold Rush in September, which peaked at number 8 and included his first top 40 solo hit, which was about you, right? Only Love Can Break Your Heart?
About me and Joan, yeah.
Yeah. And then Stephen's eponymous debut in November. David's If I Could Only Remember My Name came in February 71. And then your record in May 71, Songs for Beginners. All 4 of those records placed in the top 15 on the Billboard 200, with Stephen's entry peaking the highest at number 3. It had 2 top 40 hits, Love the One You're With at number 14, and Sit Yourself Down at 37. And he was also the first one to release a second post-CSNY solo record, Stephen Stills 2, which had changed partners in Marianne. But where I want to kind of veer off here into is something I've been fascinated with for a very, very long time, and I'm so excited to talk with you about, which is the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra, better known as Perro. Can you tell me about Perro, how you first got involved?
I probably first got involved when I did my singing on If I Could Only Remember My Name. Obviously, because David lived in Mill Valley and was friends with the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane, he obviously, as a musician, would love to play with those guys. And that's when I first became acquainted with Perro.
Actually, the first album you guys did together was Blows Against the Empire. I think that came just before If I Can Only Remember My Name. And I believe you mixed the entire second side of that record. You actually write in your book that you, quote, had the acid-drenched pleasure of having done that. Did you actually accomplish that while you were tripping?
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I asked Yorma about that. He doesn't remember if you were actually on LSD. How did you accomplish that? I mean, I can barely scratch my arm when I'm on acid.
Yeah. I was dabbling in acid, I wasn't taking gigantic amounts of it. I could certainly function and I could certainly hear. And I did mix that entire second side. And it was a great pleasure, because I think when you're appreciated, when you're asked to do something that obviously they could do, but they wanted my version of what I thought that they sounded like. And I thought that we did pretty good together.
You did an incredible job. I mean, it really does achieve a kind of liftoff during that second side. And it does have aspects of an LSD trip, and only the best aspects of it. For people who don't know what Perro is, in my personal estimation, musically, I believe it's the peak of all of the great conceptual ideas that all of the musicians in the San Francisco area had about communal living and, music having no boundaries. And it was basically and predominantly members of Jefferson Airplane, The Dead, Quicksilver Messenger Service, CSNY, and a few other people, including Joni. It was everybody who was anybody. It was Paul Kantner who came up with the term Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra. And I believe it was Stephen Barncard, the engineer, who came up with the anagram to fit it on the side of the DAT tape that you and he... Was it in 1991 that you did rough mixes of a bunch of those session tapes and sent it to Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah. So February 2nd, 1971, David Crosby's solo LP, and what looked like to be the only solo LP he would ever make in his life for many, many years, If I Could Only Remember My Name. I have a close friend, his name's Simon. He's got the title of the album tattooed on his arm.
Yeah.
He is actually Lindsey Buckingham's manager.
Ah, interesting. Interesting tattoo.
Yeah. So in a Rolling Stone interview, David said, I was an immature person, stoned out of my mind, hit with something I absolutely couldn't handle. It's amazing I managed to get into the studio to make the record at all. Obviously, he's talking about Christine. And after CSNY imploded in July 1970, or at least took some time off, David spent the next few months living on his boat in Sausalito, where he did very little but sleep, eat, and drown his sorrows with alcohol and drugs. Eventually, he started thinking about making an album like you guys did, or were doing at the time. But the big difference, I think it's pretty safe to say, is that while everybody was, not necessarily straying very far from the CSNY sound, David was doing something that was stranger and less commercial. It was consciously less commercial. Some of the new songs didn't even have lyrics, just, scatting almost, like his version of what scatting would be. And I think the hero of this enterprise, from what I've read, is Jerry Garcia. He was around quite a lot during this time, and he and David had already collaborated as David and the Dorks, which was also sometimes known as Jerry and the Jerks, which was Jerry, Phil Lesh, Bill Kreutzmann, and Mickey Hart. And it was just 2 or 3 unannounced gigs, all at the Matrix Club. Basically, Jerry took time out from the Dead's tour schedule to join his friend at the recently opened Wally Heider studio in San Francisco. And together, they recruited a stunning assortment of people to work on this record. I always wondered, and maybe you already answered this question about Stephen not really understanding David's music. Why no stills? Is it because he really felt like Stephen would not be able to add anything?
Yeah, and I think both of us. I mean, I don't think Stephen's on Songs for Beginners either. We had a lot of songs that we had written. And if you're not in the studio with CSN or CSNY, what do you do with all those songs?
Right.
You do solo records too. And I think David deliberately wanted to make an uncommercial record, but he failed miserably because it was brilliant. and a lot of it was spearheaded by the presence of Jerry Garcia. Yeah. Yeah. Because don't forget, when we were in the studio in Wally Heider in San Francisco, when we were doing Deja Vu, we were in Studio A, in Studio B was the Jefferson Airplane, and in Studio C was the Grateful Dead. Right. All at the same time.
What Jorma reminded me is that, this was just a sort of in-the-moment conflagration, because Jefferson Airplane was, I'm guessing it was Bark that they were recording, but they were already there. It's not like, the call went out to come to the studio to record on David's record. It was just like, hey, you're down the hall, why don't you come hang out? And magic was made that way.
Yeah, magic, particularly in Garcia's pedal steel work on Teacher Children.
Well, Teacher Children and Laughing are kind of the yin-yang. It's like his way around a commercial sounding, traditional sounding pedal steel was done to perfection on Teacher Children. And then on Laughing, I have never heard a pedal steel played like that in my life.
And that was one of the joys of playing with Garcia, because, he didn't play it like it normally would be played in most country records. Right. It was very much San Francisco sound. And a little later, of course, he played on I Used to Be a King sing on Songs for Beginners, and also Phil Lesh too.
Yeah, and they did an amazing job on that. I can't talk about that one too. So the crew on this record, it really is mind-blowing to look at not just the track list, but the gatefold on this thing. There's pictures of everybody, and it's just thinking about all these people in one room, the energy that must have been created creatively. It's hard to even picture this. So it's David, you, Neil, Joni, Jerry Garcia, Phil Lesh, Mickey Hart, Bill Kreutzmann from The Dead, Greg Rowley and Michael Shreve from Santana, and from The Airplane, Jack Cassidy, Jorma Kaukonen, Grace Slick, Paul Kantner, and David Freiberg. I mean, that's insane.
Yep, it was insane. But you know what? It was normal for us to be doing that. Only in retrospect does it sound insane right now. But then it was just what we would do normally.
Yeah.
You know, if we needed a bass player, and Greg Reeves wasn't there, then we would ask Phil Lesh to play bass. You know, it was normal for us to work with each other.
I wish it lasted 40 more years. Honestly, I really do.
From your mouth to God's ear.
Seriously, I mean, when you talk about magic, because this record, it's very different from most records. The listening experience I've had in my life, it gets better every time you hear it. Every single time it gets better. It was made during a roughly 3-month period in late 70 to early 71 with a routine that barely changed. David said, quote, I would get up on my boat around noon, walk into town for some breakfast, and just try to survive the day. Usually sometime around dinner time, I would arrive at the studio, then I'd work most of the night. He went on to say, these were all good friends and good people, and they knew that I was lonely, and they knew also that I was slightly nuts at the time, and they would come and we would play music. I would sit down with whoever did show up, most often Jerry, and start playing a song. And we had 2-track tape running constantly the entire night. And the minute that something started to happen, the 24-track would start to roll, and then I would start layering harmonies onto it. And then I got to counter that with a quick quote from Stephen Barncard, which I love that David put in his autobiography. It starts, David was an asshole. He was particularly nasty to me, and I wasn't starstruck. I'd been exposed to enough talent. I admired his music for years, but I wasn't going to put up with bullshit. It meant double shifts because I was also working with CCR in the daytime and then working with those guys until about 3 a.m. It was the most exhilarating project I've ever done in my life. There was a lot of time frittered away and playback parties that I wasn't quite used to. It was a loose setup, and I'd been doing some pretty tight projects before that, but I learned to relax with it, and before we knew it, we were ready to mix. This was in January of 71. How big of an effect was Stephen Barncard at that time in all of your careers?
Stephen Barncard was several things. First of all, he was a gentleman. Secondly, he was a fine man. And thirdly, he was a brilliant record maker. The thing about Stephen that was so great was that he would wait for it to happen and he would recognize when it was happening. And as you said before, then the multi-track machine would start going. But I would be very interested in listening to the 2 tracks of the sessions for If I Could Only Remember My Name. I'll bet it's got some pretty far out stuff on there. Kids and Dogs and Mount Tamalpais High at 3 o'clock, things like that. And I think Jerry recognized where good music was coming from. And I believe that's why he was waiting in the studio for David every night.
I mean, the DAT tape that you assembled, it's not just what was released on that anniversary edition. I have something that I found that's a bootleg, and there are an endless amount of songs, and everything is as good as everything else. Everything could have made it on the album. It's hours of stuff. And all of it is top notch. I'm assuming you have that, right?
I don't, and I would appreciate it if you'd send me a copy.
I will. As soon as we're done here, I'll send you everything I have. I believe it's what you and Stephen put together, but this could be an augmentation of what was done as well.
Right. You mean Barncard, of course.
Yeah. I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Stephen, but normally people, when you say Stephen in regards to us, you think of Stills.
Yeah. Well, so back to If I Could Only Remember My Name, the one review that it really is kind of crazy to think of is in 2010, the record was listed second behind the Beatles' Revolver on the top 10 pop albums of all time, published in the Vatican City newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano. Did you know that?
I did indeed, and I thought that was an incredible statement. I mean, who knew that people in the Vatican were listening to If I Could Only Remember My Name? And, I mean, that's insane.
It is insane because it's so obviously, and I say this with great love, it is head music of the top order. The fact that they're connecting with it on a cosmic level away from that, it speaks really to the album's eternal strengths.
Yeah, and music is closely aligned with religion too, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I've written songs in an hour and a half, you know, just a song before I go and Our House, etc. But it took me years to finish Cathedral, right? Because I realized that, you know, even though I don't believe in organized religion, I do pray every single night to the spirit of this entire universe. I realized that religion is incredibly important to millions and millions of people. And I needed to make sure that every single word that I wrote was at least true to me.
That must be an amazing thing to have a project like that spans the years and then to see it come to fruition and for people to get it.
Yeah, they get it. Even today, they get it.
Yeah. So once you drop the needle on this thing, first of all, one of the amazing things about If I Could Only Remember My Name is that it truly does sound like a stylistic compendium of the three bands who made up Pero. So the lyrics and the harmonies are pure CSNY, but the extended running times and the sort of loose jazzy feel is more like a Dead record, but the slightly hazy and sloganeering lyrics, definitely more akin to the Airplane. So yeah. You have the best of all the worlds coming together, and we start with Music is Love. Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show per week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. This episode is brought to you in part by Bespoke LA. Located in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles, Bespoke LA is the modern podcaster's dream come true. It's got 2 podcast pods available, one with audio only and the other with both audio and video. Just think, you can start your own podcast tomorrow without investing a single penny in equipment. What, you don't have experience editing? Don't even sweat it. For an additional fee, Bespoke LA can edit your podcast. Or not, it's entirely up to you. Rates start at $75 an hour with discounts if you book 4 sessions at once. Go to bespokela.com/podcast. That's BSPOKELA.com/podcast for more information or to book your time today. And be sure to tell them that Dave sent you for a one-time 25% discount. And we start with Music is Love, which is true hippie commune type stuff, as pretty as it gets, unbelievably released as a single, and it peaked at number 95. But forget about that, because this is not about making a hit single. This is actually something that we have you to thank for, isn't it?
Yeah, in a way, yes. I did recognize when Crosby had a couple of lines of Music is Love. I realized just from the title alone, it was completely true. And I wanted him to finish it. We were in the studio with Neil at the time. And once we had gotten it to a certain point, Neil definitely was into it, because I think all of us believe that music is love.
But he was actually, and I find this amazing because, man, is that song beautiful. But David was just going to toss it. He thought it was just a throwaway thing that he was messing around with while rehearsing for another song. And you told him, I think that's the beginning of your album. And you and Neil were amazed that he tossed it. And then you overdubbed vibes, congas, guitar parts, a bass part, and harmonies and give it back to him.
That's right. Yeah, it was basically my recognition of something that David did that was totally true.
Amazing. And again, that communal spirit, that family atmosphere where sort of an extension of you not babysitting, but looking out for your good friend who was in dire straits and going around the world on a drinking spree. This is you looking out for him in a different way musically.
Yeah, because, I love David to this day. He's in my prayers every single night. I love Crosby, and I tried to be there for him all my life.
Do you have a relationship with Jan after his passing?
We have emailed each other a couple of times, but I recognize the fact that towards the end of his life, David was not very happy with Jan. He loved her for many years, of course, ever since the day that he met, I think, in Criteria Studios in Miami, when she had, I think, broken her leg or something and had her leg in a cast. But she was a really nice person. But then she became incredibly competitive and demanding. And so, I heard from the Carter guitar people in Nashville, in Tennessee, that she is working on selling some of David's guitars. And I'm going to talk to her about that, because, he still owes me $8,000 for finding and having somebody fly to Florida to pick it up. His acoustic guitar, is a two-part guitar, Gibson, a body with a gilled neck, a beautiful guitar. And he still owes me a fortune for it. But of course, it'll never get paid. And I don't really care.
Well, knowing what you did for David, I know you put his kids through school for a long time. I don't know how long, but I know that you were the one paying the way, and I know you weren't expecting anything from it except doing it out of love and just terror about, what was perhaps waiting around the bend for David. And I believe you also purchased his copyrights and allowed him to continue making money off them, didn't you?
I did. When I heard that the IRS wanted to lay claim to his music, me and a friend, we bought his copyrights. And we held on to them for, a couple of years while the IRS thing was being sorted out. And once it had been sorted out, we gave David his publishing back.
Yeah. Look, I prioritize friendship really highly in my life, and even as an adult. But it's a stretch to find somebody like you in the world. Whoever is lucky enough to be able to call you a friend, I know you obviously really have your friends' backs. It's a rare quality.
Well, I love people, and I love people that are trying to do their best to make the world a better place, not only worldwide, but also their own intimate stories. I've always loved Crosby. I always recognized him as a genius from the very start. As a matter of fact, I have a piece of David's writing that he wrote to me where on a simple half a page, torn page, he writes, "I am a genius," and it's misspelled.
That's great. When did he write that?
Oh, probably about 4 years before he passed.
That's fantastic. Just so I can picture it correctly, how does he spell it?
Geinious.
That's great. All right, so Cowboy Movie. It's an early contender in a long history of CSN songs in which you four sing about each other. And it's a very beautiful list of songs that you could really put a beautiful compilation together, either a playlist or a release unto itself of you guys singing about each other. Most of these songs are not friendship songs. Most of these songs are brutal, really brutal.
Yes.
But Cowboy Movie is probably my favorite track ever, where Crosby rocks out super hard.
Yeah, he does, yeah. It was a song written about the four of us, of course, and what happened to us. And it includes Elliot Roberts, too. But it was mainly about Rita Coolidge.
Right. So Eli is Stephen Stills, the Duke is Graham Nash, Young Billy is Neil, and Cros is Fat Albert, and Raven is Rita.
Correct.
Right. And of course, there's going to be a lot of other songs down the line. Do for the Others, Into the Darkness, Glass and Steel, Only Love Can Break Your Heart, Hippie Dream, of course, King of the Mountain, and a couple others that are worth mentioning where I feel like Neil perhaps goes too far. The Old Homestead, and then the main one is Thrasher. Do you know the song Thrasher?
I do.
How do you feel about knowing that those lyrics are written about you guys?
Well, it's just Neil's opinion about what was happening. And, many times he has pointed out a certain truth that really happened. I enjoy Neil's work. I think he's a brilliant musician. There are certain things about his life that I don't agree with, but I love working with Neil. And Thrasher is a perfect example of what Neil thinks the four of us were.
Yeah. I mean, to say this, and this is also during an active friendship. It's not like you guys were no longer friends. He's saying, so I got bored and left them there. They were just dead weight to me. I mean, that's not very nice. It's a great song, but when I was younger, even as a teenager, I would listen to this and think, I wonder what the other guys think about knowing that their friend wrote this song about them.
Once again, Neil is there for Neil.
Right.
And if he considered us to be dead weight, then God bless him.
I guess. Yeah, Neil. Oh, man. What an eye roll when it comes to you guys. So Tamalpais High at about 3, another masterpiece. And this could very well be my favorite wordless scatting song that David does. And
but Song with No Words is great too.
That one's awesome, yeah. And of course, you created half the title of that song, right? It was a compromise between his title and your title?
Correct, yes.
Yours was Tree with No Leaves, right?
Right.
Yeah. I love that Tamalpais High, as gorgeous and flowing as that song is really kind of a lecherous nod to high school getting out and, watching high school girls walk home after the bell rings.
That's right. I
love that. The combination of lecherous sex and beautiful cosmic music is a perfect balance.
And that's who Crosby was.
Right. Did he ever talk about doing an entire record of this kind of scat singing?
I can't remember ever having a conversation with him about that. Obviously, that BBC thing that we were talking about earlier has a song with no leaves. Yeah, we talk about that, And Crosby says, this is where I'm at, and then he calls it "Song with No Words," and then he looks at me and he goes, to the audience he goes, and he wants to call it "Tree with No Leaves." That just shows you where he's at.
I mean, just that gesture alone, that he included your part of the title, it's an act of love to have done that, I think.
He knew that I loved his work. He knew that I loved him as a person. He knew.
Then comes Laughing, which is, honestly, I believe it's one of the greatest songs ever written. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity to do as much research for this as I did, because I found out that it's actually a response to George Harrison.
Yes.
George had gone to India, had a lot of fun.
And don't forget, David was partly responsible for that, because it was David that gave George the Indian records.
That's right. If there was no David, there'd be no sitar, there'd be no Ravi Shankar, right?
Correct.
In all likelihood. So George had gone full flower into meditation and, what you're doing now and what you and I, the School of TM. But at that time, George was basically playing follow the leader. And David said, quote, I wanted to say to him, be skeptical, take it with a grain of salt. Anytime someone tells you they talked to God right after breakfast this morning, they're probably bullshitting you.
That's why Laughing is such an incredible song.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the basic premise of the song is that, the bottom line is that the only people who really know what's going on and what the truth is are kids. A child laughing at the sun knows more about God than I do.
That's true, yes.
And, this is Jerry Garcia playing pedal steel at its absolute best. And the pedal steel itself sounds like pure, unadulterated grief. And then Joni springs up with her wordless vocals. It's like watching a flower bloom. The way that she sings, it's just pure hope. So it's the unity of grief and hope. It is such a profound song.
Yeah, we used to do Laughing when David and I did shows. One of the great versions of us doing it live was when we played in Padua in Italy in, I think, 2014 with Shane Fontaine, on guitar and Stevie D on drums. I was just listening to that. That's why I said that.
Wow. I would love to hear that. Does Shane still work with you?
No.
No? Okay. I know that Jerry's work on Laughing was his favorite ever performance.
Fantastic.
He felt that this performance showed him where he'd like to go with pedal steel in the future, which is a total bummer because as it was, around this time is when he stopped playing pedal steel forever. It's like he took it as far as he could have gone. And Jerry said, as far as being personally satisfied with my own performances, which I rarely am, David's gotten better out of me than I get out of myself.
That's probably true. And that just shows you how much he trusted Crosby.
Yeah. Then comes What Are Their Names, which is a very special song, perfectly sequenced, sandwiched between two almost unbearably beautiful songs. To have an angry chorale sing-along is just smart thinking. And I guess David he said he's sung it at every gig he's ever done since he wrote it.
Yes, almost. Certainly 90%. Because it's a question that still needs answering today.
Right.
What are the names? Who are the people that are running this world? Who are the people that are financially creating this incredible divide between the haves and the have-nots?
Yeah. It's a shame that it's just as timely today as it was then. And then the creation of this thing is possibly the most magical on the record, except for the last song, which we'll get to. But it's just basically David and Jerry goofing off. You can hear the other guys come into the room. He said, I'm just quoting him now. You can hear the other guys come into the room, pick up their instruments and start jamming with us. And then months later, I was in an airplane and I wrote those words. I realized there was a space on the tape that had fit this, and they fit perfectly. And then what happened was, Steven says, I didn't have much time to do it. Maybe a 10-minute window to record all those people. Joni Mitchell, Grace Slick, Paul Kantner, David, David Freiberg, Jerry Garcia, Phil Lesh, Bob Weir, and he says maybe Mickey Hart and Spencer Dryden too. Everybody is singing in that pocket there.
Yeah.
It feels like it was carefully planned from the beginning, but the whole thing was just magic. It came together.
Well, it certainly wasn't planned. And for Stephen Barncard to be able to just technically be able to put that together was brilliant on his part.
Yeah, truly amazing. From an engineering standpoint, to me, that's the most jaw-dropping track on the record. And then Traction in the Rain was my way into this album. It's the first song I heard from it. It's staggeringly gorgeous. I mean, he says that may be one of the prettiest songs I ever wrote. It's just a straightforward singer-songwriter beauty. And, looking into what actually inspired it is very illuminating. Apparently, a heckler walked up to David. Do you know this story?
Not from what you've said, but continue.
So a heckler walked up to David while he was out walking with Joan Baez and Mimi Farina and attacked them for their outspokenness and their hippie ideals. And basically the song is Crosby once again putting forward the peace manifesto and being befuddled over why everybody else seems to be jealously picking on him for leading an unconventional life. And so the T-shirt turning green is people being in envy of him, of the turtle doves or the peacemakers. This is Crosby's later analysis of the song. And then, the song itself is so musically fragile that it sounds, to me anyway, like the great hippie dream that you guys were living at that time is about to break apart at any minute, which indeed it actually was. And that Crosby's doing everything he can to hold on to the beauty that he sees in the world before things get too ugly.
I would think you're completely correct.
It's probably the most beautiful song on the record for me.
Well, good.
And then Song with No Words had been tried out during the sessions for Deja Vu. And what David says is David Geffen didn't like it, but David has a very limited conception of what was music. He's a very bright man in some areas. You probably won't want to play poker with him. He's a very, very intelligent guy, but he never understood music and probably never will.
I think that's a little long. That's a little far. I think David Geffen really understands music. I mean, it was him that understood Laura Nero's albums and music. And he obviously saw, for want of a better word, the brilliant combination of me and David and Stephen and Neil. So I think that may be a little too far.
David had a tendency to go there, though, didn't he?
Yeah, unfortunately, he did.
Yeah. I mean, I think, his persona that he played on Twitter, may have been a side of him, but it was a character he played, and he played it to the hilt.
Yes, he did. He played life to the hilt.
Yeah. And then Orleans. Orleans is a traditional song that David learned from Paul Kantner with 9 vocal parts of David's, which is absolutely beautiful. What I love about this record as well is that it's structured so the last 2 songs, this huge star-studded guest lineup, everyone goes away, and then Crosby's all alone for 2 tracks.
That's what I love about a song that we did called Where Will I Be?
Oh, yeah.
Probably one of the most delicate and most personal songs that Crosby ever wrote.
I love that song. And something I could think about forever, just get lost in a rabbit hole thinking about that, is that it feels like an answer song to the song that directly preceded it. I don't know if that was on purpose, but Page 43 and Where Will I Be feel like a question and an answer.
Very much so.
And then I'd swear there was somebody here. Stephen Barncard says, I don't know where that came from. I witnessed the creation of the song in real time and recorded it as we went along, and it was probably the most remarkable event in my entire life. So Crosby, I mean, the story has kind of gone into the annals of history at this point. Crosby says, I was sitting there kind of goofing around, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't goofing around. It was probably the hardest night I had. I was just crying my eyes out. I was devastated and crying out all that pain into an echo chamber. And all of a sudden, it started being coherent. It took about 12 minutes to record. Stephen Barncard says 14, and it might be the best piece of work I ever did. It's just 6 vocals, one right after another. I just did them, and then we played them back, and this is what it was.
Yeah. Crosby was brilliant, and I think that record shows Crosby's brilliance, and I think it will be enjoyed for centuries.
Yeah, agreed. And then worthy of talking about, but on that tape that I'm going to send you after this, it's got way more than just this, but Kids and Dogs, it's another wordless scatting beauty that Crosby came up with that easily could have been on the record, as could have 1 or 2 hours of additional material. And the 2021 50th anniversary reissue of the record has tons of outtakes and demos and liner notes by the great and sadly departed Steve Silberman.
Yes.
And that incredible assembled take of Cowboy Movie that has the only guitar interplay between Neil and Jerry Garcia.
They played it differently on different tracks, and yet when combined, it looks like they're conversing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you did that.
It's part of what I do, kid.
That's amazing. So I don't think I probably need to say this, but I give this 5 stars.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, kid.
I appreciate that, Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
All right, that about does it. Stay tuned, because next week's the premiere of a brand new series about which I couldn't possibly be more psyched. It's our Billy Joel series featuring Mark Robinson from Unrest. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then come Monday, the major tier gets a very special treat. Monday's bonus episode is another Chuck chat from the Chuck Granata Pet Sounds interview series, this one with Larry Levine. Legendary Gold Star engineer Larry Levine was the man responsible, side by side with the Wrecking Crew, for building Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. His peak accomplishments include Be My Baby, Summertime Blues, River Deep, Mountain High, You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin', He's a Rebel, Then He Kissed Me, A Christmas Gift for You from Phil Spector, Pet Sounds, Smile, and so many others. Larry passed away just a few years after this interview in 2008, which makes this posthumously released Chuck Chat yet another priceless buried treasure. There will be a very short sneak peek running publicly for free on Monday morning, but the entirety of the show will only be accessible on the major tier of our Patreon. Don't miss it, or you'll only be getting part of the story. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier gets their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of Part 1 of our Billy Joel deep dive with Unrest's Mark Robinson. It's the episode as it was truly intended to be heard, with all the essentials left intact. And then come Friday, everyone else gets to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Graham Nash, Richard Holland, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Bespoke LA, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the classic rock and roll from the 1960s is to go to the Beach Boys Season 1, Catch a Wave, 1961 to 1964, from episode 189 on, the Righteous Brothers Bill Medley interview, that's 181 and 182, my interview with the Free Design, that's 160 to 162, my epic interview with the Mamas and Papas Michelle Phillips, that's 141 to 159, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, that's 137, my 12-hour interview with Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from the Association, that's 109 to 113, Vashti Bunyan reading her entire output, that's 103 to 104, Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes, that's 86 and 87, Bert Summer, that's 83 and 84, Sweetwater is episode 79, a tribute to David Crosby, 77 and 78, Andrew Tuttle rates the Monks, 74, Jim Florentine on Black Sabbath is 64 to 68, Lou Barlow on the Zombies is 59 and 60, Marvin Gaye biographer David Ritz rates Marvin Gaye, that's 45 to 47. Blind Faith is 43. Anthony Fantano rates the Velvet Underground, it's 32 and 33. Bob Forrest rates the band is 25 and 27. Monkees manager Andrew Sandoval rates the Monkees, that's 22 and 23. Don Randy rates David Axelrod is 17. Badfinger is 16. The Bee Gees is 10 and 11. Sly and the Family Stone is 5, 6, and 7. And Pink Floyd is 1 and 2. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, November 21st, we're coming at you with part 1 of our Billy Joel deep dive featuring the batshit crazy yet somehow most perfect guest imaginable, Unrest's Mark Robinson. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!